Hi, I'm John Atack, and
And
this
I'm
is
Jessica Terwiel.
my very good friend, Jessica Terwiel. And Jessica is a clinical and forensic psychologist. Would those be proper titles for things you've done along the way?
They would be proper words, yes. In my country, the titles are different, but yeah, the content of what I've been doing is accurate. Yeah.
Okay. And you brought up the subjects of self-esteem and self-assertiveness, self-assertion. And when we last spoke, and I thought had some very interesting things to say about that. So I'd like, if you could explore those ideas for us, that would be great.
Let's give it a try. I come unprepared, so we'll just improvise our way through this.
Yep.
I think the main thing that I was saying is that they are closely related. There is no sane way of working on one's self-esteem without learning to really assert one's boundaries and to really keep other people out of one's front garden, as they say, out of the front lawn. And the other way around. There is no way of getting a healthy self-assertiveness, self-assertion, if you cannot have a good, healthy self-esteem, if you cannot profoundly feel that you have a right to exist the way you want to exist, that you have a right to have your own wishes and your own preferences, and to say, this is not my thing, don't do this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, Craig Malkin, in discussing narcissism, he's at Harvard Medical School and is a clinical psychologist, and he gives this spectrum, which we talked about, which at one end has the narcissistic personality disorder, which he scores at 10, and at the other end at 0 has what he calls egoism, which is where somebody has no sense of self-worth. And in the middle at 5, he puts healthy narcissism, which, as you pointed out, could also be called healthy egoism, that you're using a pathological condition to describe something healthy is a little disturbing. But I suppose his argument would be that the self-esteem or self-worth is what's being measured. He actually says it's a scale of feeling special, which I'm not at all sure about. But I think self-regard, self-worth, self-esteem, I grew up in a culture, Christian culture, where the idea was that you shouldn't boast, you should be modest and humble, and you shouldn't have any idea of your worth. And I've struggled with that all, I'm 65 now, I've struggled with that all my life. That, am I allowed to think I'm good at doing anything? Am I allowed to say I'm good at doing anything? Which is kind of asking, am I allowed to have self-esteem? Yes. And it's a different thing when you're a braggart, when you're a narcissist and telling people how wonderful you are. Usually it's deceptive as well. But it's a question I wrestle with. How do you? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I struggle with these superficial interpretations of narcissism. As if it were a sort of an overestimation of oneself. It usually isn't. It's just a behavior that stems from profound damage to the sense of self and the sense of belonging and being meaningful. So people can act importantly in various ways, and sometimes it is a very shy. We call it the narcissist in the back garden.
Yeah.
It's a very shy. Complaining, whining way of being a narcissist. The fainting room narcissist type of thing. So I would, under the ruler that you lay out, I would say that in the center there is the real self-esteem, and towards both ends, whether it's the echo end or the narcissistic end, the self-esteem is just not healthy enough. It's back down to 0.
Yeah, that's
so real self-esteem is a very calm and solid experience. It is just a way of, it's a cat has real self-esteem. They're just comfortable because they are being themselves. And everybody recognizes, everybody can look at a cat and think, oh, I wish I could do that. They know exactly where they want to sit how they want to sit, or whether they want to stand or walk or lie down, or make you hug them a little bit or something. They have no doubt whatsoever. And they're totally okay with that. That is self-esteem. That feeling, that feeling of just filling your skin and experiencing and thinking, this is me. So?
Well, it's a very interesting analogy, because about 7 years ago, a feral cat came into my garden and adopted me. And I'd never had a cat before. And it was quite vicious for the first 6 months. But I just became fascinated by this animal, that the way that it communicated, the way that it related, that, as you say, they're like, this is me, this is what I'm doing. And there's no question about it. Whereas with many dogs, you've got the idea that they're dependent. They need you to be there. Whereas the cat's sort of, almost schizoid in its ability to be itself. It doesn't need you. Only, there you are. It wants to be fed, so it looks at the cupboard and it looks at the plate until you do what you're meant to do. But that self-assurance, which even becomes physical. I saw this thing about a cat that had fallen 19 stories and just got up and walked away. So they are so self-contained, so assured that they can even physically, they are capable of dealing with situations which would cause death to human beings, basically. And something about their poise, something about their physical completeness is quite impressive.
I'm guessing that the 19 stories is a bit symbolic of what the cat managed to do, but the general idea is that they managed to do something like this.
No, they showed the 19 stories, and they showed the cat, and they showed the window it had gone out of. It had fallen that far and nothing was broken. But that, yes, it becomes symbolic in the sense that we're looking at, that possibly, and I'm extending the metaphor, which is always dangerous, but possibly that self-assurance, that self-esteem in a human being makes us, or would make us, far more resilient. We wouldn't be hiding in that back garden, or we'd be able to take life on the chin, because we feel assured of ourselves. We wouldn't collapse as narcissists do, for example.
Exactly. I'm going to silence the phones because I'm suddenly aware that they're making noises.
Yeah, I got mine a moment ago, actually. When I read
okay. So that's better. Get that over with. Yeah. So yeah. And the thing is that you can see that with the cat also. They do come together. Being aware of who you are and who you want to be can only come with manifesting it in the world, and just telling people, oh, that's a very nice idea, but I'm not sure it's my type of thing to do. So yeah, wish you luck, and see you some other time. To just be able to say that.
It's to some extent what Authoritarianism calls intelligent disobedience, the ability to, as he says, with small children, when somebody asks you to do something you're not sure about, you blink so that you can think, and you then make a choice about whether it's a good idea or not, and then you voice that choice. And I think in a society which still, despite our many freedoms, tends to demand obedience as part of the education system and overrule thinking and decision making, which I think is a dreadful mistake. It's not a matter of allowing kids to be disobedient and to, be rowdy. It's a matter of inculcating and encouraging decision making, critical thinking, the ability to withdraw from a situation and say, do I really want to be involved in this? And indeed, should I protest against this? The next stage, is this something that's wrong? Which we've seen in racial politics, in gender politics over the last decades. We've finally seen some advances towards equality. Sadly, we haven't actually reached it. And that's because people are willing to assert themselves and take the risks necessary because they have enough belief in the causes and the ideas, to be able to do that.
Yes, and only when you know what it's like to just have the right to be yourself is when you discover how boundaries actually work and how to find the healthy location for boundaries between people, because obviously my freedom stops where yours begins and yours stops where mine begins. So if we can look at those freedoms from both angles, from yours and mine, we can find the boundary that is in the right location, exactly between the two. Yes. Where I'm not being gobbled up by your narcissistic dominant freedoms or the other way around, and where we can both be our own cat and let the other cat be and do their thing in their territory. When I work with clients, I use the metaphor of the territory quite a bit. And I tell them that what is important for any animal really is territory, the right to exist on this planet in their own place, in their own space, in their own right, in and of their own right. And how that works is with aggressive energy. And that doesn't mean fighting all the time and being aggressive. In fact, there is not that much aggression going on in the animal world, because all aggression comes with wounds, and wounds come with bacteria and possible death and all kinds of horrible risks. So there's a lot of, showmanship, there's collars, there's growling and howling and whatnot, and dancing and peeing around, to show
I always
here.
do that, yeah.
Yeah, so, leaving the smell. Yeah, using the paws to leave the smell, etc., and birds singing to make it known that they live there and that tree is occupied and things like that. And that, but it is aggressive energy. It is self-manifestation. It is the message: this is me. I live here. I have my own space. Thank you very much.
But there's something interesting that has come out in the study of cats, which is about territory, that cats actually share territories. It's been found by observing them that one of the cats, it owns this territory until 1:30 in the morning, and then it moves off and another one moves in. And this has been observed all over. So these very exact agreements have been arrived at. And when you watch cats, and again, as I say, I had two cats after my first cat, Pushkin, had to be put down, sadly. And I've watched them with tremendous fascination, how they relate to stranger cats. And they do this thing where they'll sit and look at each other for a little while. Yes. Another cat comes onto the territory, and then they'll lie down and they roll over towards each other. And it's like they're making some kind of pact about, what's permissible and who can go where and what can happen. But that setting of boundaries also, it not only includes space, it includes time. That there are shifts going on.
Yeah.
And what you say about birds also, about 15 years ago, I'd be riding my bike at 1 or 2 in the morning, being a night bird. And there was all of this noise in the trees. And it was all the same noise. So it was the same kind of bird. And I had no idea what was going on. And then quite by chance, I saw something on the television where somebody was talking about this amount of noise, or I read it in New Scientist, I can't remember. And they're robins. And what's happened is there was an overpopulation of robins, and the males were staying up all night shouting at each other because the territories had become too small. And this problem seems to have gone. So I'm presuming the cats have eaten the robins.
They've exhausted themselves too much. With all the
exactly.
shouting.
They didn't get any sleep,
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yes. Well, I think with humans, it's the same. I mean, you see couples fighting all night and doing what the robins do, because the territories are not well divided within the household. And they exhaust themselves, and they exhaust the marriage if they cannot solve it. It's pretty much the same thing. But I really like to, when people do not have a healthy self-esteem, when they don't feel they can, when they're pleasers, basically, when they have too much of echo in them, I do try to help them make contact with the aggressive energy, with the self-manifestation, because that's what you need. And if you do it properly, you get this calm. It's a very solid, calm feeling of having the right to exist, of being okay with yourself. And that's not a narcissistic way of being okay with yourself because you're just as fallible as anyone else. But there is consolation in being just as fallible as any other human being. You have the right to be a human. You have the right to be silly and stupid and dumb. And that's absolutely fine. We all do that. And sometimes we misbehave, and sometimes we do something on impulse and we regret it and we feel ashamed. And yeah, we all do that. That's absolutely fine. And nobody has the right, and that's where self-assertion begins. Nobody has the right to use your mistakes or to use the things that you do and that they don't like, or the things that you do wrong, as an excuse for getting into your territory.
Yeah.
That is just not the case. Everybody makes mistakes. That doesn't entitle anyone else to behave like a jerk.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It just doesn't.
And you do get those situations where somebody will just keep coming back to something that happened 5-10 years ago, and that is given as a reason for them controlling you in some way.
Oh yes, and the you pointing in the here and now. Yeah, but you just did this or that. You have just been unreasonable. Yeah, sure, maybe. Maybe. It doesn't give the other person any excuse whatsoever to be so nasty or to sit there and accuse and point fingers and, and just say unpleasant things in an unpleasant way. No.
And you can get a one-sided change of boundaries. In my first marriage, I was with my first wife for 19 years. And sort of about halfway through, long ago in the 1980s, I decided that I needed to think more about the way that men treat women. And so I introduced this idea and said, I need to be doing more of the housework, more of the cleaning and the cooking and the laundry and that kind of stuff. And it took me, it's probably a couple of years before I realized that this had devastated our relationship, because basically I'd changed the rules because I could see that this was wrong, but she didn't agree with me. She, later on in therapy, she talked about being servile and having grown up in a household where she was meant to be a servant, where she was meant to do these things. And of course, my coming along and saying, well, we should share these things without getting a consensus on her part had changed the rules. And, there needed to be a discussion rather than either partner going, I've worked out what reality is. And, it was an imposition, even though it was an imposition of the right rules, I still feel it was not, I didn't do it in the right way. And that brings us, I think, to consensus, democracy, these ideas of agreement between people, which brings us to a core topic that you and I have discussed very often, which is authoritarianism. And as you pointed out to me long ago, there are two forms of authoritarianism. One is the bully who wants to be in charge, insists on being in charge. And the other, and perhaps 2/3 of human beings, but quite a high proportion, don't feel that they have the right to be in charge, even of themselves. And so they will submit to leadership and they want to be told what to do. And for me, the transformation in society that needs to take place is more people feeling that they have the right to assert themselves, they have the right to an opinion. My niece did a master's degree, and we ended up with the title, which I gave her, and it's rather cumbersome, How Much Democracy is Enough? And she works in local government. She's an executive in local government. And she put out a survey to people to see how much they wanted to be involved with the governance of the place they live, the local area. And the first thing was realizing just how few people responded to the survey. And that of itself was a sort of, oh, right. A lot of people are just like, well, you make the decisions.
Yeah. Everybody who doesn't vote, and there's large numbers of people who don't vote.
40% or so,
yes.
yeah.
And then many authoritarians who do vote may probably have this mixture of wanting to follow a leader, but also of wanting to dictate how others should live. That's obviously there are mixtures possible.
There was a recent Israeli election, and there was an interview of some women who were coming out to the polling station, and guys said, "How did you vote?" And they said, "We voted for Likud." And he said, "And why did you vote that way?" And he said, "Because the rabbi told us to."
Yes.
The old argument about why women shouldn't have the vote because they just do what their husbands did, and why, of course, the polygamous Mormons were strongly for women having the vote, because they do as they were told was the idea. It's a strange contradiction.
Yeah. Well, on the other side of this same coin, there is this not only the authoritarianism, but anybody living the cult way of life, living in closed groups with a lot of manipulation and a lot of psychological force being exercised against their individuality, usually. Because that obviously comes with a lack of identity. Identity is replaced with the cult identity, with what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to feel, what you're supposed to suppress.
How you're supposed to behave.
Yeah, absolutely. How many hours you're supposed to sleep, at what time you're supposed to drink, how much you're supposed to drink, what you're supposed to eat.
Which side you sleep on. In Zen Buddhism, you have to sleep on your right-hand side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the aggressive side.
Yeah, which is very strange prescriptions, because usually we turn around quite a bit during the night, which is makes us naturally unsuitable for their doctrine. But anyway, there is no real self, there is no identity, there is no healthy, aggressive energy feeling of, well, this is me, just, you go ahead and deal with it, just move over a little bit, this is my spot. All of that isn't there, which means there are no healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that a lot, because I have been working with so many people who have somehow escaped such a setting, either within the family or a small group or a large group or a dangerous group, but they have escaped this cult style of living, and they struggle for years with boundaries.
Yes.
And with that comes the difficulty with the moral part of decision making regarding boundaries. How do you decide what is the fair thing to do when there's more than one person in the quandary that you're facing? And this is very, very hard work for people who have never been allowed to have boundaries at all, who have always been bullied into things, and who have been trained to bully other people into things, and to just all, like we call the crab basket, we call it, where every crab is trying to climb out, and in the process they push the other crabs to the bottom. So there's a sort of everybody pushing each other down.
Yeah.
And that's the exact opposite. You don't have the self-esteem and you don't have the self-assertion. They come together. They always do. Either the lack of both of them or the growth of both of them.
Do you have any tips for the development of self-esteem, of self-assertion?
Yes, for the pleasers and the people who notice that they lack self-esteem, I in my experience, the first thing that people need is to usually with the people who have learned to please and to give way, to give in, they have learned to not have a proper judgment of their own. Not only self-judgment, but also judgment of others, and just general judgment of things, like, which is my favorite color? Which is my favorite fruit? What soup would I like to prepare tonight? Which is the basic things of being that cat and deciding, I don't like the taste of this. Cats can do that. They can stare at you like, you serve me this? Are you kidding?
Tuna? I don't like tuna. I want cat food.
They will stare you down because they don't like this. They're not going to eat this. You're going to serve them some proper food. But so that's a good place to start. And I usually have to work with people for quite a while to just develop a preferences, to just develop some identity, to know which is your favorite color. which pair of shoes is your favorite pair of shoes? What color shirt would you like to buy if you could really, pick your favorite? That's difficult enough. And then comes the judging of other people and behaviors. Do I think this is polite? Do I think people have the right to do this? Do I think that if I allow this person to treat me in this way, does that mean that I would allow myself to treat them in this way?
Yeah.
If not, then I'm doing something wrong because I'm discriminating. I have to fix my judgment. Either I wouldn't ever treat them in this way, so I should be intolerant of them treating me like this, or I think they should be allowed to do this, but then I should ramp up a bit because I'm not capable of doing this. They're saying no, and I couldn't. So this, and that's where the better levels start. And only if and when people manage to build this solid bit of common ground with themselves, knowledge of themselves, feeling okay with making decisions, feeling okay with having preferences, and judging the world, judging their situations, judging quandaries, judging decisions. That's where the self-assertion really comes into play.
I mean, one of the first things, it's often remarked as somebody comes out of an authoritarian cult where they've been engulfed and isolated, is you go to a restaurant and you offer them the menu and they say, what do you think I'd like? Exactly. What do you think I should have? So, and I have this thing, I'm a painter. That's what I really am. All of this other stuff I do as well, but I'm actually a painter. And when people talk to me about, wanting to develop artistically, I will say, work out what you like. Don't try and be commercial. Don't try and do something for others or others' preferences, but go exactly with what your tastes are. Use the colors you want to use, the forms you want to use. And eventually, and sometimes quite quickly, you will develop a voice. You will develop, and I would say that with any good artist, their work is incredibly recognizable. I remember being in the Norton Simon Gallery in Pasadena, I think it was, and there was a painting that was too far away for me to be able to focus on it at all. I'm short-sighted, about 40 meters away or something. And yet I knew it was a John Singer Sargent. And it fascinated me that there's something in the line and the color of a Sargent that's recognizable. The same would be true for Cézanne, for Rembrandt, for anybody, that you basically follow what you like, develop what you like, and explore your tastes. And at that point, you become unique. You have a voice, and the same is true, of course, for a musician or for a writer, for anybody. So that's an interesting point. I'd never really connected that to the very simple thing of saying, first of all, work out what your preferences are. What type of material do you like to wear? What color do you want it to be? What cut suits you? Not, what does anybody else think? And you may end up dressing the way I do and looking ridiculous, but at least it's personal. It's how I want to look.
Yes.
And beyond that, go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
The second point that you make, which is about looking at how other people behave and saying, do I approve of that behavior? And it may be that they're managing to assert themselves. One of my brothers was in a restaurant many years ago, and they weren't getting any service. So his friend got off his chair, lay on the floor, and started pretending to have a seizure. And when the waiter ran over, he said, "Oh, well, I'd like the steak." So there are behaviors that can be seen as being a bit extreme, but what is it permissible to do? I've recently run into a conundrum in a relationship where I grew up in the Goons generation after Spike Milligan. I was actually, I think, about 5 when the Goons show stopped being on the radio, but it meant I got 3 older brothers. So I grew up in a household where it was perfectly normal to just suddenly burst out and say, "It's falling in the water," or something like that. Now, you try this with people, this absurdism, as it's sometimes called, with people who didn't grow up with Monty Python and this kind of thing, and you get the strangest looks. You've got this cultural thing. And sometimes you have to kind of negotiate with people about that, I was wanted to show a movie, Total Eclipse, which is Christopher Hampton play about Verlaine and Rimbaud, the poets. And I said, of course, sir, you will have to watch out because Rimbaud was Belgian. And I got the strangest look because now in my family and among many British people, this is immediately recognized. It's a non sequitur, it's absurd, ha ha, and on we go. But to somebody who's trying to discern meaning in what's being said, it's incredibly difficult.
Exactly.
We won't talk about Americans and Germans at this point. Actually, the Germans did very well with Monty Python, and the Americans did much better than the Canadians, who just sat there going, what are they doing? Hitting each other with a fish. Perfectly normal in England. We do it all the time. Very comic. So sometimes there's a cultural dimension to it, but sometimes it is, you've talked before about difficult people, which is a very good way of putting things, that where somebody will come to you and they'll say that they were shouted at because they'd done something wrong. And you'll say, had you done something wrong, or was the shouting actually something to make you feel you'd done something wrong? Was it a deliberate ploy?
And either way, being shouted at is not something that you deserve for having done something wrong. It's impolite, it's unpleasant. If somebody has an opinion and they would like for you to do something differently, they can just ask. They can just sit down and say, look, if you don't mind, I would like to give you a little bit of feedback. It's been bothering me for 3 days. I just want you to know, please don't do this. Could you rather do that? Thank you. There's nothing wrong with doing just that. If something has been enraging for whatever reason, and maybe it was totally wrong, maybe it wasn't, but at least it doesn't entitle anybody to yell and shout and scream. I think it doesn't. It's unpleasant behavior.
It's a form of assault, and the only time when it does become relevant is if you're trying to stop a child from going in front of a bus.
Of course, when the house is on fire, by all means, scream and just yank people out of the house. I mean, politeness comes later because life comes first. But on all other occasions, you can just take your time and calm down and say it in a normal fashion. Even if the other person has been horribly wrong.
Yeah. I live next to a school, and I was very pleased when it became the law here that children could not be hit by teachers. I thought that was a definite move forward out of the Stone Age and towards modern times. But what I noticed living next to a school these last 25 years is that there were teachers who yelled their heads off at kids. Now, that does seem to have calmed down a little bit, but nonetheless, this idea that a verbal assault was permissible without realizing, some kids, that's going to be meaningless. I can remember I had a next door neighbor, and believe it or not, she was an official in social services. And I was woken one morning and I looked out of the window at her screaming her head off. She had her back towards me, and her 2-year-old, who was standing looking up at her, I could see right into his face. And I could see that he would spend the rest of his life taking no notice whatsoever of this. He'd already got that his mother was completely crazy, and you don't pay attention to such people. It was quite remarkable.
Either that, or he was in a dissociative state.
Yeah.
And he's going to spend his life trying to not go into dissociated state because he might start screaming when he does. And it might be utterly out of contrle. But if this was a clever kid who managed to be a good cat, then he would just sit there like a cat and think, you're being silly. Because that's what a cat would do.
Yeah. I mean, it's how it seemed to me. I lived next door to them for 3 years, and he just seemed to not pay any attention to his mother.
But imagine the damage that you have to do to a child for the child to decide, I'm going to ignore this person.
And imagine how his relationships were probably going to be after that. Wonder why she was an executive in social services, given her problems,
Yeah, but we can talk about career choices in care and things, and the reasons that people may have, and the character pathology that they may have that may lead them to these choices. But that's for another day, I would say.
And why, unfortunately, many of these institutions are failing us as a
Yes,
consequence.
yes, totally. Yeah.
Okay. Anything more on this topic immediately?
Well, yes, because for people who are looking for a way of setting their way through services that are supposed to help them and finding some sure footing for not being a pleaser anymore, for knowing how to say, I'd rather not, thank you. And to feel okay with that, even if they get a lot of pushback and bad behavior because they're not allowed to say it and they want to say it anyway because that's how it works. You set a boundary, you get a lot of yelling and screaming and whatnot, and you have to just keep setting the boundary until the other person finds out that it's not going to work, that the yelling and the screaming.
Yes.
And that takes some stamina, it takes some courage, it takes some determination, and it takes some cat feelings. You know, the capacity to just look at them and think, yeah, okay, you're done yet? I mean, it's not interesting. So for people who are looking for that, there is this modern approach that's called trauma sensitive working.
Okay.
Trauma sensitive it comes closest to what I think is a healthy way for people to learn boundaries and to overcome all the traumatic experiences with the other person being angry, which is usually just a way of shouting people down to get them to do what you want.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with anger. It's just frantic behavior for no good excuse whatsoever. But trauma sensitive is a key word. I see people in the helping professions reorganize themselves around that word in a fairly healthy way. They still struggle because they still want people who do something wrong to sit down with them and to reflect on themselves, because they're going to get feedback on what they did wrong and they should be aware that they've been doing it wrong and they should do better. That's to work with traumatized people. That's not going to work because that's how cults make people relinquish their identity.
Yeah, inducing guilt and shame.
Exactly, and that's working through feeling that you're not good. That's not building identity. It's not building the cat feeling. It's not building this rock solid, calm feeling of, look, I'm not doing anything serious wrong. So could you just tone it down? Thank you. You know, that's what you want to achieve, because that's where you become agile and you become creative and you can just make a joke and be kind about it and say, are you sure? You know, and that's enough to set the boundary in a pleasant way. That's where you want to go. But trauma sensitive definitely helps the helping professions to not go into the push and pull, and to really try to allow people to form their judgment first, their judgment of other people, instead of having to engage in self-criticism and having to follow rules. Trauma sensitive is very much not about punishing, not about the timeouts and the corrections and, oh gosh, the whole vocabulary that is all about making people behave in a certain way. So I would recommend that for people who cannot find anybody who works with ex-cult members or things like that, go for trauma sensitive and see what it brings.
Okay, so they just put it in a search engine and see what.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
it's quite the rage over here, which makes me very happy. It's easy for me to sort of when I advise every now and then, I'm called in for advice because they have a very difficult case and they're trying to keep the case out of the locked down psychiatric horrible places, and trauma sensitive really works with a couple of adjustments. So yeah, I can definitely recommend that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. It was only a couple of years ago that I found out the word punishment means to inflict pain upon. That's its origin. It does actually mean to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And I think we do need to, obviously we need to restrain people who are dangerous to society, but we have got into a punitive situation where there's this idea that if somebody's in prison, it's okay if they're treated badly because they deserve it. And of course, you're much more likely to rehabilitate the person and bring them back into society if you don't do that. It doesn't really help people to have pain inflicted upon them. It doesn't really teach them how to behave.
Definitely not. No, and vindictiveness is in its purest form. When somebody grabs your food and you're hungry, it's absolutely fine to have vindictiveness right then and there, and to just whack them over the head and get that food back and eat it before they do.
We'll
I
tell the
get
judge you
that.
said so.
I get that. I mean, that's just, survival instinct.
Yeah.
In a society where we have more options and where we can try and leave each other alone and look for a better and more civilized way of coaching each other into civilization, vindictiveness is not the way to go.
No, and
very destructive.
It's sort of a marker point, the blood feud, revenge, the vendetta, that where societies begin to recover is where they give that up. I spent some time looking into the Cherokee people. I was very interested in them, and their first encounter with I think with Spaniards was where a Cherokee said, "We exist to fight war. That's what we do." And they're getting their own back on their southern Iroquois. They were getting their own back on the northern Iroquois and chasing them off. And their whole culture was around that. Quite a number of native cultures are. That's how they get their jollies. That's what they do. And a transition happens in Cherokee culture where they say, we're not going to do this anymore. Of course, their cousins, the northern Iroquois, are famous for the expression burying the hatchet, where the 5 and then 6th tribe came together and buried the war hatchet and said, we will no longer persist in this. They then designed a constitution which influenced the American Constitution. It preceded it and influenced it, where they started making agreements about not doing this and working together. And you have to, first of all, give up the blood feud. You have to give up the, my granddad did this to your granddad. We're beginning to see that in Northern Ireland now, beginning. Particularly the women in Northern Ireland decided they didn't want to be doing this anymore. So we had a peculiar situation, I think it was last year, where the Stormont, the Northern Irish government hasn't been meeting because they couldn't agree. The Protestant and Catholic factions couldn't agree on anything. So they came back together, and then they couldn't agree on who should be the speaker in the House, so they went apart. But when it came to the abortion laws, curiously, the Protestants didn't want termination to be legal, whereas the Sinn Féin, the Catholic Party, were okay with it, which is an interesting contradiction with what the papal rules are. So that was quite interesting to see. But hopefully, gradually, people realise, as Ian Paisley and Michael McGuinness, the two Chuckle brothers, as they came to be known, who had been on opposing sides and advocated horrors and done bad things, they came together and became friends. And there really is hope for us all, because these are two men that I personally would have had no time for, but they somehow decided that they had to work together. And at that point where people, it's like in a bigger way, asserting themselves, creating boundaries, and not taking an aggressive, hostile view of one another, recognizing that the other person is human.
Of course. Well, you see vindictiveness diminish as people learn boundaries.
Yeah.
I have talked to numerous people who come out of cults who were fervently in favor of things like the death penalty, or death penalty without trial. Just if they're a suspect, they just should be put to death. And boundary problems, severe boundary problems, probably from the doctrines, not because they are the bloodthirsty people or anything like that. And as the boundaries develop, this vindictive style just goes away, and people figure out that if there's a spot for them, there may be a spot for everyone, and if we have to work on it, we will.
Yeah.
That it comes with it's a package deal.
Yeah.
Package deal with the self-esteem and the cat feelings.
Becoming a cat.
Yes, becoming a cat.
There we are. we haven't exhausted the topic and we never will, but have we come to a reasonable point to conclude this discussion, do you think?
For now, yes, I think so.
Good.
Quite happy.
Well, this has been Catwoman, and this is Jessica Terwiel, and I'm John Atack, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.